Hey guys, I'm Wyatt Pruitt, and I just wanted to put a reaction video on here about Anglican Aesthetics for Sean Luke's Catholic Reconquista. Now, this video is a response to Redeem Zoomer and Gavin Ortland's face-off about the mainline church and the evangelical churches in how do we retake America's culture and how do we retake the Christian culture and have a revival of American-rooted Christianity. And the main point that Sean Luke makes in his video, I think that you can sum it up is that the mainline churches are but an accident of rootedness in the gospel. And the rootedness really is in the great tradition of the church. And this is something that the Reformers talked about a lot, which is that, is it better to have visible unity but no gospel, or gospel and no unity? And I think that, and that's an extreme statement, but the rather would be have the gospel. This is something Gavin Ortland talks about a little bit. Now, admittedly, I haven't seen that video yet, but I will. I've seen clips of it, and I've heard that he's talked about it, but it is a 2-hour and 9 video, as you can see from here. Now, I wanted to talk specifically about Sean Luke's vision for a Catholic Reconquista, because I think it is exactly what I have been trying to do for about 2 or 3 years now. And it's all kind of come together, and I can see that the internet and the Christian community at large is kind of headed in this general trend where they're understanding the church as synodal, and that the fights that we had during the Reformation and immediately post-Reformation period are not necessarily the same anymore. In fact, I think especially between Anglicans and Lutherans, their views on the real presence, as Sean Luke has said, are very, very close, in that they are not irreconcilable. And so what I agree with Sean Luke that when you look at the conservative Reformation, that is mainly the Anglicans and the Lutherans. And generally you can see that they're very amicable and they go together very well. But I also want to say that there is still hope for the Reformed churches. Specifically, I want to say the Presbyterian Church in America. And let's say a church like the URCNA, the United Reformed Churches of North America. And it is because of this. They have a rootedness in the tradition of the superintendence of John Knox. And when you look at what John Knox, yes, was against certain Catholic traditions such as kneeling or for communion and things like that, because he wanted to steer things towards pure worship, whatever that meant to him at the time. But he conformed as much as he could to Catholic form, Catholic ecclesiology. And the way that he had this set up was with the Scottish superintendent system. And I think that in order for the Reformers and the Reformation traditions to be united again, and mainly that being the Presbyterian Reformed, the Lutherans and the Anglicans, yes, we must have the episcopate, but it doesn't, as the Lambeth Quadrilateral says, it's adapted to each nation. And I think that we can see that as we come together and we see that the church is more synodal, and this is what Sean Luke even said this, that we need to view the church as synodal, that I think that the Presbyterian view, if it is treated as an overreaction, but not necessarily a wrong reaction to the king instituting bishops in the church, which is banned by, I think, the Council of Nicaea. I may be wrong about that, but I think the Council of Nicaea bans that. It might be Nicaea too, actually. I don't remember. One of the ecumenical councils bans this. It is a proper reaction to that. The goal of Presbyterianism is then not to get rid of the bishops, but to return to a synodal model of the church. And that is where I think that the Presbyterians are not radical. And so if we can bring back John Knox as superintendent, basically in the PCA, this would mean making the moderators permanent, and giving them a more superintendent role and having them ordained by an old Catholic or a Anglican / a Lutheran who has Episcopal orders. This is how we can fix this. And what we can do is then we can go back to John Knox's system where the elder isn't even an ordained clergyman. Only the minister of the gospel was. The minister was. The pastor was. And so that's really who in John Knox's system, who the presbyter is the minister. The elders are just basically the vestry. And then the deacons just are dealing with alms. But I think what we can do is if we meet here, not in the middle, but we see the Catholic nature of the synodal model and how that was the original system set up in the Gospels, was not Presbyterian and not monarchical, but synodal among the bishops and synodal among the presbyteries. We can see how the Reformed traditions, Lutheran, Anglican, and Reformed, can come together as one church again. And this is where I have created, I've been working on this website for a while. I've shown it off before in a video before, and all the links to these things will be in the description. If you go to reformedpress.org, this is where I am trying to actively promote Jean-Luc's vision. And I would love to work with him on this. If we have anybody from GospelSimplicity to Young Anglican to Anglican Aesthetics, we all are having this shared understanding that the church, as Jean-Luc said, in the third millennium, the goal is the unity of the church, and that we all understand that the Reformation has a time limit, that we must take actionable steps. And what Jean-Luc is trying to do, his actionable steps, which for him is the reunion of the Lutheran and the Anglican churches by giving the LCMS or WELS or whatever they may be, episcopal succession, which with the WELS that would be extremely hard, but let's say the NALC, I think that we can move forward. But I don't think that this starts as a large movement necessarily on the pastoral level. I think where this can start to take root is on a congregational level. I think when the bishops and the presbyters start to see that their people want to move forward in unity and do not just love their local tradition, which is something that plagues the PCA, at least, which is the church that I'm in. What plagues the PCA is that what my church is currently doing is the tradition Catholic, and that anything else outside of that. So, for example, my Trinity hymnal is the Catholic tradition. You get rid of my Trinity hymnal, that's heresy. That's an extreme statement, but that's how the PCA's congregations can sort of see things. Along with instituting Baptists in the church, the PCA has its issues, but so do all the other churches. But we can work through these things towards unity, and if we can start I think a joint grassroots and top-down movement towards unity, it's going to start with the people of God praying for unity. And so let me go to, let me move this real quick. This is my website that I have, and I'm working on with a bunch of guys. Reformed Evangelical Catholic Press, which is, Jean-Luc already talked about this, is that the Anglicans called themselves Reformed Catholic, and the Lutherans called themselves Evangelical Catholic. A lot of the Reformed, Continental Reformed, and even Presbyterians called themselves Reformed Catholic as well. So I think that we joint the terms, and this is how we move forward with that, is that we are Reformed Evangelical Catholics, meaning we are the Reformed faith, meaning not Reformed in that Synod of Dort, 5 points of Calvinism, but we are Reformed in that we are the Universal Church Reformed to the Scriptures. And we're evangelical in that our primary purpose is the understanding of the gospel through we are justified by God's grace through faith alone, and this produces good works because faith works in love. That this is the roots of the Reformation, is that we have rediscovered the doctrine of the justification of the legal justification of the individual that moves into a theosis with God. This understanding is what the true church is about. So Reformed Evangelical Catholic. Now we're moving into the understanding of that we hold the faith of the whole church, not just our Anglican tradition or our Presbyterian tradition or our Lutheran tradition, but that where our faith comes from is from the first 1,000 years of the church before the splits, and primarily focusing on the first 500 years. This is where we go back to see where these people who knew the apostles, how did they interpret the scriptures, the ecumenical councils of the church, which we can get into the Seventh Ecumenical Council in another video, but I do have a post on here about images. And so the Reformed Evangelical Catholic Press, or reformedpress.org, what it is about is the Reformed Press exists to renew and unify the Church by recovering the Catholic and Reformed faith, rooted in the Scriptures, shaped by the creeds, and expressed in Catholic liturgies of the Church. We seek to cultivate sacramental worldview and foster ecclesial unity among confessional Protestants. And notice this is confessional. The PCUSA is not confessional. The ELCA is not confessional. The PCUSA is not confessional. This is among the confessional traditional Protestants. And through publishing, teaching, and dialogue, we labor to restore a reverent, orthodox, and incarnational vision of Christianity. These things are sorely lacking in a lot of our communities. Reverence in the PCA is very lacking. In most churches, we have lost the liturgy of the church. And in this, I can get into this later, but the goal is to return to the 1637 prayer book, which is the prayer book that was never fully instituted in the Presbyterian Church, but was approved by the General Assembly before they got rid of, or the Church of Scotland, right before they got rid of the bishops. So it was approved, it was created by the Scottish bishops, not by the Crown. And it is what the American church's liturgy is based on. And it's what the Presbyterian Church, along with the Knoxian Episcopate, needs to return to. But that's for another video. One that is faithful to the theology of the Reformers, nourished by the wisdom of the Church Fathers, and committed to forming a people whose lives are patterned after the worship of heaven and the humility of Christ. And so this is the goal of this press. And so we have articles on here from about 5 contributors, including myself. My most recent article is on the discomfort of election and how we need to remove. I am a guy who believes in superlapsarian double predestination, but I think that when we lose the pastoral role of election, we've lost the purpose of election. And this is the Lutheran and Anglican concern, is that when we move past that, what is the point of the doctrine of election? It's for the comfort of the saints. This is definitely needed more in the church, but there are many more articles on here that have been posted over the past few months. Many more. And our contributors here is me, there's my buddy Chase, Alex, Dan, and Jameson. He goes to Geneva College, and we're all moving towards the unity in the church. So how are we going to do this? On a practical level, other than just teaching, I believe this will be done through prayer. And so, in order that we may actually believe what we need to believe, the law of prayer is the law of belief. And so, let's actually pray. And the way we're going to do this, I do not have this part of the website done yet, but over the past year, I've been working on a program called Roots of Revival, which has been implemented in Lancaster Bible College, which is the college that I go to, which I'm kind of out of. It's a whole story. But Roots of Revival is a weekly evening prayer night where the student body comes together um, to participate in the Catholic tradition of the church. And this is a Bible college. This is like a dispensational school. You wouldn't think that the students there would be interested in something like this, but you know what? I think that people are yearning for a tradition that goes beyond themselves. And we've had I think our highest count so far has been 45 people have come. I'm hoping now. No, this was before we were an official club at LBC. Now we are an official club approved by the school. Um, and the goal would be to spread these out to as many campuses as we can. Here's us singing "The Church is One Foundation." And so, as you can see, I think that I've put together practical steps. So how are we going to do this? Well, first of all, we have a Reformed um, evangelical Catholic faith and practice, and this goes through, and you can read this on the website. I won't go through it too much now, um, but it goes through these 16 points of things that we need to agree upon to head towards unity among Protestants. And by Protestants, I mean, of course, Lutherans, Presbyterians, and Anglicans. Um, and chiefly, Sean Luke talks about this, is that each individual church can keep its individual distinctive confessions, but it must come into conformity with the Catholic faith. And this is what I think that we can get behind. I do not believe that these confessions that I am about to cite go against any of the Protestant traditions. And it goes back to, we need to go back to what was the original intent of the reformers, was to get on board together towards reforming the church. And I think what we just need to come together and submit. I do not think we will have Protestant unity until we can come together and to submit on these three items. The unaltered Augsburg Confession as the Protestant ecumenical council. Both the Lutherans, the Reformed, and the Anglican confessions teach that ecumenical councils are called by princes and are called by specifically the emperor. And the Augsburg Confession is something that was an appeal to both Rome and the Holy Roman Emperor. And in this, I think that we can find unity of the faith, is that the unaltered Augsburg Confession is something that all Protestants, I think, are just going to need to abide by. And I don't think there's anything that, if you're a Presbyterian, as long as you hold to a sacramental realism, that you're going to be offended by. That you hold to a true real presence in the Eucharist, which I think that the Westminster Confession of Faith and the 39 Articles are not necessarily against a Lutheran view, and that might be controversial, but I really, in my study of it, I don't think that they are. I think that we, that's a topic for another day. But needless to say, I think the Augsburg Confession as and the Luther's small and large catechisms can be a basis for Protestant unity and to bind the consciences of the laity. Meaning, and this article here is the summation of the Catholic faith. So, meaning, if you can hold to these documents, then we can have altar and pulpit fellowship together. And part of the reason that I hold that the Augsburg Confession and Luther's small and large catechisms need to be held to is because the Lutherans won't back down on that. They will not. The part of the reason why the Protestants split so much is because Zwingli and Luther could not get it together, and John Calvin tried to sign the Augsburg Confession, but obviously there was issues with that. But his goal was to be in agreement with the Council of Augsburg, and so you can give that a read. But I think that one, if we hold to these towards unity, and that we start to in our churches come together in under roots of revival and have morning or evening prayer from whatever tradition that we may be a part of. For the Presbyterians, that being the 1637 prayer book. For Lutherans, that being the 1888 divine service, or whatever divine service that they're using. But typically, 1888 Lutheran service book is seen as a standard text. But and then the Anglican 1662, the 2019, and the 1928 coming together to pray through this. And if you're part of a school, I have a special liturgy that is applicable to being in an evangelical dispensationalist setting, to just help pray for this unity. And Roots of Revival is also about promoting the Reformed Evangelical Catholic faith in dispensational schools, and in other schools as well. So this is kind of what I've been kind of working through. Sean Luke, I would love to get together with you, maybe do a joint video, or discuss what we think the next steps are in a more concrete way, and how we can push forward in this unity. And me and my buddies who are working through the site will continue to publish articles, and we are going to continue to publish videos. It being the summer, I have a little bit more time. I got some classes to complete, but I'm hoping by January to be able to commit much more time into January, February. I get married in February. To commit much more time to this, but within now, I have so much more time than when I was in school. So I'm committing as much time as I can to this as possible, and while keeping my tiered list of priorities being God, my fiance, and then this, or work, and then this. And so, yeah, this is what I think the next steps are. Is that one, we start to talk through this Reformed Evangelical Catholic faith. What parts of this are going to be a struggle for people? Next, we start praying together. We start praying through our morning and evening prayer services, and we pray specifically about this. God works. God works through prayer. I've seen it. I've seen it already at Roots of Revival, and I just pray that we can move towards this unity. And so, with that, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost, Amen. The Lord be with you.